Hello, I'm Royal Sealy, or am I? And today I'm going to be talking about my experience growing up on Neopets.com, creating a fake name for internet safety, as well as whatever else comes up. But first, I want to do a accessory highlight and show off these earrings that I got from Entangled Designs. So Entangled Designs is my favorite miniature artist. They do a lot of beautiful jewelry pieces, but also doll, playset, miniature food items, and accessories. They had a whole series for Black History Month one year where they made soul food all throughout, and it was really amazing to see all these intricate designs at such a tiny scale, and yet they read perfectly. Side of these, I also have a earring and necklace set that are a little tea set on a cutting board, and I also have a charcuterie board ring from them. So they do really amazing work, and I would highly recommend. If you are looking for more of their pieces, you can find them on Instagram at Entangled Designs, and also I believe their Etsy is Entangled Designs. So today I'm going to be talking about names on the internet and my experience growing up on the internet. So I grew up at the turn of the century. I was an excited Neopian or Neopets player. I got on it when I was very young, and I played for a little bit with my sister before she went off and started doing her own thing. And it wasn't long when I was on that site that I noticed I was at a disadvantage by being under the age of 13. So if you're unfamiliar, Neopets is a virtual pet site. It's one of the earlier versions of one. And if you go online, you create a pet, you can feed them. You can create galleries where you can exhibit different virtual items. And the idea was that you would play these mini games, you would trade with other players, and curate your own little experience there, I suppose. Well, I was under the age of 13, so that meant that I was very limited when it came to bargaining for items that I wanted. And it took some finagling, and eventually I came to the realization that I didn't actually have to be 13 in order to haggle with people on the trading post. I just had to have a birthday that said I was 13, and then I could directly message people or neo mail them and try to strike a deal. Yeah. So if you had to ask me what my favorite Neopet was growing up, it was either the Kachik or the Asia, and my favorite paintbrush from that time was the Fairy, and then later on the Moroccan when they came out with that. I really like the electric one as well, especially for Kachiks. I thought that was so pretty. But any of the ones that were more solid or muted, I tended to find them a little bit boring. And I was like, why would you pay to paint your pet this color? Now I understand people who do make original characters. It makes sense. But growing up, I was like, of course you would want the most like extravagant, ornately designed options, right? So I gave myself a fake birthday, and I went away to start messaging people and figuring out how we could trade. And it didn't end there, because turns out there were forums on neopets.com. Now, this was my first experience with any kind of forum on the internet. So immediately I was like, what is this? It was almost like a zoo. I had never seen this sort of situation. And to give you guys like a flashback of what that might have looked like when you were looking over the various boards, is you had people basically pretending to be famous people. For example, that was very popular, as they'd always be like, hi, I'm Hannah Montana. Ask me anything, or something like that. It's like, you are not Hannah Montana. So that just seemed to be the popular thing to do, at least on that board. But I continued to explore the various board options, and I came across something that was called the loop chat. And I remember going in there and being really confused and also just being an annoying little like 9 or 10-year-old and being like, what's going on? Yeah. Social etiquette was not something that I had picked up yet. But it was really cool. So on the loop chat, you had people primarily that had loops, although maybe they had other um, Neopets like alerts. It really could have been anything, but the primary focus was that you would have the loop Neopet or the one that looks more like a wolf. And usually you would roleplay them as either an anthropomorphic creature or it's just like a canine. And I was just like enamored with the idea. Before that, I thought art was really boring, like drawing. I never understood. They would take me to family gatherings, for example, and if I was the only kid, they'd be like, here's a piece of paper and some crayons. And I'm like, I'm not interested. I don't know what to do with this. It's boring. Until I found the loop chat. Because I then started clicking on these profiles, looking at these people's Neopets, and they had HTML coded their pet page to create like a whole scenery for what their Neopet was and what their character was like. They had things like music embedding, like just so cool. I just thought it was so cool. And I remember seeing my first anthro art when I was there, and I was like, wow, that's so creative. You can just make your Neopets into characters and write about them with other people. But the thing is, I was just a wee lad. And I knew how dangerous. That's my baby. Come on. Are you going to be big? Or are you going to be small? So the thing was, I was a child. And I knew how dangerous it was to be a child on the internet. So I was going to make myself safe. And the way I was going to do that is I was going to make myself a fake first, middle, and last name. And this would not be my only time doing this on the internet. But I found it kind of freeing to be like, yeah, I'm so-and-so. And it's like, okay, that name may or may not be real, but whatever. And I went back to start thinking about what it was like to create different pseudonyms. And I had various I went by over the year depending on just where I was at in life. Because as you can imagine, when you start at 9 to 10 years old on forums, you grow a lot throughout your teens. And maybe you want to be more mature and go by a different name. But I was inspired thinking back about this time in my life, especially since I'm becoming more active in online spaces, and even more so when I'm considering going to conventions, especially for Lolita fashion. I began to think, what would I introduce myself as? So if you've watched my #1 teacup video, you should by now know how I got my username Royal Sealy. But I began to think of the logistics of introducing myself in convention spaces as Royal Sealy. And that's not really a more natural sounding name. If someone were to call me that, it does definitely sound like, oh yeah, that's a username. It's not a person's name. So I began to think, how did I go about finding a pseudonym in the past? And how would I go about finding one that would fit me now, especially with my Lolita interests? Lolita fashion, taking inspiration from French Rococo and Victorian era fashion, I thought it would only be fitting for me to explore options. So I was looking at first names, middle names, last names, and also doing a Google search of those possible names because, as you can imagine, it would just be really terrible to pick the name of someone who turned out to be a real poop bag, like, to put it kindly. Best case scenario, they're an asshole. Worst case scenario, they're like a colonist or something. Yeah, little baby cat, you can come up. So this is my kitty cat. She's gonna be hanging out. She got her tail shaved this week because she went to the vet and they had to take her blood pressure. So she's got kind of a funny tail right now. She's also got this big chip on her ear. Yeah, because she used to be a stray. So when they have stray cats, especially in cities, in order to prevent more stray cats or feral cats growing, what they do is they'll tip neuter release. And what that means is they will capture the cat, they will neuter them, and then they'll take the tip of their ear right here and they'll do a little snip, a little notch. That way, when they re-release that cat, or if that cat gets outside again, they know that cat is at least neutered or spayed. Now, she must have had something going on with her ear because she does not have a tip cut off. She has a chunk cut off. So for that case, we call it her trapezoid because it's a trapezoid. So I think she'll be sitting with me for at least a little bit of this video. So, names. What's in a name? As I was saying, Lolita fashion taking inspiration from Victorian and French Rococo fashions, I thought it would be fitting for me to create a pseudonym that reflected that aspect of the fashion. However, I also wanted to be careful when picking a first and a last name to avoid picking anyone that was like the worst, literally like the worst, no other way around it. So I'm looking through these lists of names and I'm not feeling the most inspired. There was a few that I was leaning towards and I started to notice a pattern. All the first names that I was interested in were ones that were plant related. Well, then I got to thinking, what if instead of a traditional first name and last name, I ended up picking a flower? And I had reason for that. So during the Victorian era, there was an influx of people naming their children after various flowers and plants and combining flowers together to make first names. And this went across various genders. So it wasn't just for those that were more feminine presenting in society. Even ones that were more masculine at the time or assumed to be masculine had floral names. And each name, of course, means something different. There's also the art of flower bouquet arrangements and courtship when it comes to Victorian history. So I ended up picking up a book from my local library, and it was called A Victorian Flower Dictionary, The Language of Flowers Companion, by Mandy Kirkby with an introduction by Vanessa Diffenbaugh. So I haven't finished reading this book yet because it is quite dense, but it is fascinating so far. The way it's set up is they have 50 flowers that they go in depth about, where they'll usually have a page to 2 pages of information on what that flower meant or signified in Victorian culture. Other facts as well, maybe a little snippet of poetry, but it doesn't end there. After the 50 flowers that they choose to go in depth on, they then have a glossary of other flowers that maybe were not given an extensive show, and they give examples of what that flower could mean. They also, at the end, have bouquet ideas or flower arrangement ideas, signifying different feelings. So if you're someone that's into floral arrangement, I could see you really enjoying this book, at least from what I've read so far. So I ended up flipping through this book here and there, and I did have one thing in mind. There were certain sounds and letters that I'm more fond of, and just flipping through, I ended up finding one that really stuck with me. And when I read the description, I felt as though it accurately described my experience and who I was, because if it's supposed to signify something, I would like it to signify me. So the flower that I ended up picking was the mignonette flower. And when I first told my partner that I was going to go by this name, they said, "Mignonette, I'm not a fan of that." And I said, "Why? Is it because of the minions?" Yes. Well, I managed to win them over because occasionally you'll have YouTubers that will refer to their followers by something. They'll be like, "All right, pop stars," or whatever it is. So I don't know if I'd ever be someone like that, but if I am, I could then call people my minions, which has kind of like an evil, ooh, henchman kind of vibe to it, and I thought it'd be kind of funny. When I shared that, my partner was like, "Okay, mignonette, minions, it's fine." So mignonette, I'll read a little excerpt here. So the first line gives off what that flower would mean. Your qualities surpass your charms. But what really stuck with me was reading the paragraphs after that go more in depth. Outwardly a shrubby plant of modest and unassuming proportions, it does not ravish the eye, but its sweet scent is magnificent and quite unforgettable. Said to be stronger at the rising and setting of the sun, it is the virtue that lies within, not without, that are signified by this flower. And then they have a little drawing in here as well of what the mignonette flower looks like. And there's various varieties that you can find, but there it is. It was also considered to be a more calming flower, and I have had people tell me that my voice is pretty calming and that I can give off a calming presence at times. But the part that I really resonated with was this line. Outwardly a shrubby plant of modest and unassuming proportions, it does not ravish the eye, but its sweet scent is magnificent and quite unforgettable. Now, I really resonated with this. I have kind of a more even toned voice. I'm told by some people that it can be kind of calming, but it's also one that I notice in a group setting can kind of fade into the background at times. But I happen to notice that even though this is the case, my ideas tend to be picked up on, and I do seem to make more of an impact, whether people are consciously aware of that or not. It's not uncommon for me to be in a group sitting situation, for there to be a problem at hand, for suggestions to be made. And when I make a suggestion, if it happens to go that way, it usually gets misattributed to other people. Now, I've gotten better at this as I grow up, depending on the situation and what it is. So if it is work focused, I would like my accomplishments to be recognized. So if that's the case, I'll be like, hey, yeah, like that was my idea, especially if it's work related. But in other times, I've kind of learned that like this is just kind of the way it goes, especially when you have a more quiet, even toned kind of voice. Also been told by people that my voice can be kind of calming, so I find that really flattering because I would like to give off a very calming and accepting vibe. And in that way, I really resonated with the mignonette flower. Looking at it, its shrubby appearance seems like it is something that can get overlooked, and I definitely feel as though I get underestimated at times in various aspects of my life. So there we go. My pseudonym for this channel and while I'm wearing Lolita is mignonette. I just think it's a really pretty flower, and reading about it, I felt some companionship with. Alright, so outside of Lolita, I've been playing a lot of Breath of the Wild because the new Legend of Zelda game came out, and I figured a lot of people would be selling their copy used and that I would get a deal, except Nintendo is literally the worst. Their used copies were only $5 off of what a new copy would be for this 6-plus-year-old game. Just kind of ridiculous. So I ended up getting it anyway, and because my partner has a card that is associated with the store we went to when we went to check out, it ended up being more than $5 off, so it felt worth it. But we were talking to the store people here, and with the new one coming out, we were like, oh, hey, like, do they have any posters? This game store is known for having a lot of extra posters or figures or like little plushies or keychains that back when I was growing up in my day, if you just went up to the counter, they'd be like, yeah, we got all this random stuff back here. Like, you want any of it? So I had a feeling this wouldn't be the case because capitalism and where we're at now, because no one's giving out freebies anymore, or any kind of like promotional thing. It just kind of is what it is. And then of course it's more expensive, but the distribution of that wealth is maybe not going where it should be going. But I figured I'd ask anyway, and they told me no, they didn't have any extras because Nintendo didn't even send them enough for the pre-orders that they had received. Which means that if you pre-ordered the new Legend of Zelda game, which is $70 US right now, you would just be getting a cartridge, basically, without any goodie. And I just was like, that's so sad. Imagine waiting that long. And because they don't give you booklets inside of games anymore. They really haven't done that for a long time. But they used to give you like a poster or at least like a game guide in there that would have additional facts, something cool that you could flip through if you wanted. And that is like way long gone. But I'm really reminiscent for it. I feel like I'm one that prefers a physical copy because if something ever went down and I couldn't access a downloaded version of it, having that physical copy, I mean, that'll always be around. Plus, you can sell back a physical copy, but when you have a digital copy, you can't do that. So yes, I'm enjoying playing Breath of the Wild, the last Legend of Zelda game, not the new one, and it's all I want to do anymore. Outside of that, I have my local community's ILD day coming up a bit early, but excited all the same because it's a swap meet. Yeah. So my kitty cat is giving me the look. I think I should wrap this up. Thank you for watching. And did you play Neopets? Were you on the Neo boards? Did you role play Neopets? Maybe we know each other. Outside of that, do you have a favorite Neopet? Did you play a different virtual pet site? I grew up and as an adult, I found out about the virtual pet site Meower, which I think is always in some kind of drama, but that's a different story. I want to know what virtual sites, what forums you hung out on growing up if you are of that generation, and thank you for watching. Trapezoid.